Hey, what's up, guys? It's me, Tahir Danish, and I'm back with another episode of Chasing Happiness. And today we are interviewing Andrew Tarvin. He's the world's first humor engineer, a computer engineer, and a stand up comedian. He's the CEO of Humor That Works and has also worked at Procter and Gamble. So, help me in welcoming Andrew Tarvin. And Andrew, if you're listening, thank you so much for doing this episode with me. Thank you so much. And let's get started into the podcast. So, uh, introduce yourself first of all.
Sure. So my name is Andrew Tarvin, and as far as I know, I am the world's first humor engineer, which is basically just a made-up job title that I gave myself.
That story itself is so interesting. Like I was watching your interview, and I literally wanted to skip this one and just keep watching and keep listening to you. And then I came up with that thought, oh, I'm actually going to talk to him in the next few minutes. So that's really nice. How did you exactly go from, like, you were a computer science engineer? So how did you go from computer science engineering, which is numbers and everything, to a humor engineer?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's where, in a sense, that's where the job title comes from. Is the idea of, when I was a computer science engineer, I was helping organizations and people solve problems using things like computer programming and technology and all of that. Whereas what I do now is I work with organizations and teams and individuals on how they can solve problems using humor. So, what we say is we solve human challenges, things like workplace enjoyment, employee engagement, stress management, leadership, communication, etc. So those human challenges with humor solutions. And the background is, I wish I had a sexy story of like it all happened in one day and poof was magic, but it was very much an evolution. I was going to the Ohio State University where I got my degree in computer science. And while I was there, my best friend wanted to start an improv comedy group. He needed people and forced me to join. And over time, what I realized was what I learned doing improv and then a little bit later doing stand up. What I learned there was incredibly helpful for me when I was a project manager at Procter and Gamble, and I was drawing just as much on that skill as I was on the technical skills, and realized that it was helping me get better results with humans, and that's kind of where it all started from.
So you were working as a product manager in product in Gamble. So from there, you just went to this. So this is like a gradual story, right? You started
Mm-hmm.
helping other people and developing the social. So did you have humor as something innate, or did you develop it?
It's definitely something that I had to develop. I growing up, I was never the life of the party type person. I was never the class clown or anything like that. I was more of the reserved, student, the academic, more focused on, soccer and my grades and video games and all of that. Less so on presenting in front of people. But when I started working at P&G and was drawing on this improv and stand up, the things that I had learned is like, oh, okay, hey, this improv activity that I did over the weekend for learning more improv is actually a great demonstration of communication. So maybe I could start my meeting with that just as a way to make it a little bit more fun. Or, hey, this kind of nerdy joke that I wrote for the stand up set that I was going to do actually kind of fits with this email. So maybe I'll add it as a joke to the end of this email. And as I started to kind of explore this intersection at P&G, I started to see better results. People actually started wanting to come to my meetings. They started wanting to open my emails because all of it was a little bit more fun. And so I decided to proclaim myself the corporate humorist of P&G. I got internal business cards made. I started an internal blog where I was just talking about kind of the research that I was finding about the value of humor in the workplace, and also just looking at poking fun kind of at the culture in a positive way. Like we had a bunch of billion-dollar brands there, so I made a poem of all the different billion-dollar brands, and we had a training module that was kind of around the 5 E's of leadership. And so I wrote an article on the 5F model of unleadership, or all the things that people were doing that demotivated the people around them, kind of with a sense of humor. And that kind of stuff spread. People really like read it. They would comment on it. They would, send me emails about it. And that's where I kind of had this initial inkling, like, oh, okay, maybe there is something more to this idea of teaching people this valuable skill of humor.
And this is about in the year.
So I graduated from Ohio State in 2006, and then started working at Procter and Gamble that same year. In 2000, late 2007, I started kind of blogging about the idea of corporate humor. 2008, I proclaimed myself the corporate humorist. And then in 2009, a year after doing that, right, like you said, it's a very gradual story. A year after that, I decided, I was like, oh, okay, if people in this in P&G are enjoying this, maybe other people will as well. So then I created my company, Humor That Works, mostly as a blog at first, and just sharing resources, and shared that in 2009. And over that time, continued to do more and more, now some with some external events, doing some external speaking, doing some external workshops, and falling in love with the work. So then in 2012 was when I left P&G and started full time. So yeah, that sexy story of becoming the humor engineer starts with the initial kind of inkling of it happening in some ways in 2004 when I first started doing improv and stand up, more recently in 2007 when I started internally blogging about it, and then full time in 2012. So that's a pretty big gap.
Yep. And how did you get the idea of the title humor engineer? Like claiming yourself as the world's first humor engineer. Is there any sexy story behind that one?
Well, I mean, I don't know how much is Googling sexy, but the reason for it was, so I got selected to do my first TEDx talk, and this was a TEDx talk at Ohio State, so my alma mater. I had because of the improv group that I was in, we had an alumni show every year where if you could come back and you had graduated from the school and been through the improv group, you come back and do a show, and did. Did the show, and there happened to be a TEDx event happening that same weekend. So I went and chatted with the organizer, shared with them a little bit about my story, that we had started this group and all that. And they're like, "Oh my god, we love it. Make sure you reach out and let us know, because we'd love to have you speak next year." So I do that, and so the following year, and then as I'm prepping for that talk, I realized I needed a way to articulate what I was doing now, because they wanted me to talk about kind of this humor in the workplace thing. And so I needed a way to kind of frame that I was, no longer a computer science engineer. And I realized, I had that epiphany that, oh, I'm solving problems now using humor. So maybe I'm a humor engineer. So then I did a bunch of Googling to try to see if anyone else had kind of come up with this idea, this terminology. And the only thing that I could find, even when using quotes in Google, if you know your Google foo, you need to, like, there's certain parameters that you can do to get a more specific search, even with quotes and all that. The only thing that I could find about humor engineer would be jokes about engineers.
Exactly, the memes, all those memes about engineers. In India, it's more common because we have
Yep.
too many jobless people around here.
Yeah, and so instead
Anyways,
of that, so I was like, oh, I think I'm the only person to call this as my title. So again, as far as I understand, the world's first humor engineer.
exactly. It's so nice to hear that someone making their own job title. It's amazing.
Well, and
So
it's amazing because people will start referring to you as that. Like, and I first noticed this when I proclaim myself the corporate humorist of PNG. I kind of assumed that someone would stop me. I thought someone from HR or legal would come up and be like, "You can't just create your own job title." But no one ever did that. Instead, people just started referring to me as a corporate humorist. And then the same thing with humor engineers. I have told people now that's my job title, and that's what they, that's what they print in magazines or in publications, or that's what they say before I'm getting ready to speak, or that's how, I'm listed in my bio and things like that. And it's, it is kind of funny. You can create, in some ways, create your own job title, and you can, and people start to refer to you as that.
Google to says that.
Exactly. Google says that. And if Google says that with
Yes,
the search, probably got to be true.
exactly. It's really amazing to be able to talk to world's first human engineer. It's so amazing. So how was that shift, like very open-hearted question? How was that shift from a 9 to 5 working engineer to an entrepreneur? And that was the same year you wrote your book, right? Humor That Works.
Yeah, so that was the first. So the first book came out, 501 Ways to Use Humor, came out that same year, 2012, and that was part of the goal. The reason why it took me 3 years to leave was because I wanted confirmation to myself that I could be successful if I left. And so before I was comfortable
Mhm.
leaving P&G, I created a spreadsheet. And the spreadsheet was all okay, like Operation Leave Corporate America was the name of it. And it was all the things that I needed to accomplish before I could leave. So it was, have a website up with some client testimonials, have done X number of events, have, made X number of dollars from these external events. One of the goals was to write a book, or at least have the idea for the book completed before I could leave. It was also, hey, have a little bit of savings so that if I don't make any money right away, that I'm okay. Kind of with the mindset like, okay, if I try this, if I leave P&G and I fail miserably or I hate it, well, I'll be able to survive a period of time, and then I'll go back and get a regular job if I need to. And so that's what I did. I had that confidence. And I'll admit, first, like, leaving it, it was harder than I expected, because working at a company, there's some advantages to it. One, you get a paycheck regard, unless something bad happens. Once you're receiving that paycheck, assuming you do
Yep.
your base level job, you continue to receive that paycheck. That's not true as an entrepreneur. As a speaker, that's not true. Like, unless you're speaking, you are not, getting paid. Also, you have people who are there to help you and support you and looking after you and making sure that you actually show up. Like, when you become an entrepreneur, no one checks on you to see that, when your alarm clock goes off in the morning, that you're actually waking up and starting work. No one's kind of, checking on you in that way. And so when I first started, it was a little challenging of creating that discipline for myself. I hate waking up early in the morning. I'm not someone who can do it. So I was like, okay, maybe, now that I work for myself, maybe I don't have to set an alarm at all. And what I found was that I would just start waking up later and later. So then I'd go to bed later and later. And by a week of trying no alarm clock, I was waking up at like 3 p.m. in the afternoon, having missed most of the workday, when I needed to be sending emails or other things. I was like, okay, that's not sustainable. And so then I was like, oh, well, maybe, you read so many articles of people always waking up at like 5 o'clock in the morning. So I was like, okay, maybe I
Yep.
need to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning. And I tried that for a week, and I was relatively productive, but I hated the first 3 hours of the day. Like, I think my body is just not primed to wake up at 5, at least at that time. And so I was miserable. And I was like, okay, I don't care how productive I am. If I hate a big portion of my day, it's not worth it. And so then eventually I settled into a rhythm and recognized, okay, I feel pretty good waking up right at about 9 a.m. every day. And that seems to be early enough to still hit business things. And so if I need to go to bed at, okay, so I need to go be in bed by about 1 or so. And so that became my schedule for a while. So it was a time period of a lot of experimentation, a lot of, getting distracted by the internet, a lot of testing things. The engineer in me loves testing things. So I need to see, okay, should I have meetings in the morning or the afternoon? Should I, take breaks during the day or not? When should I exercise? So I just experiment with a bunch of things to try to see, okay, what impacts my motivation? What impacts my ability to get work done? And it was a long process. It's one that I'm still tweaking.
Keeping in mind how much you love spreadsheets, I just hope you are not going to make one after this podcast.
No, but this
Really,
will
I
go.
know
It
how much you
will. It
love pot.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that it will go into a spreadsheet. So I do have a spreadsheet of all the podcasts that I've done, just so I have a
Okay.
link to all of them and I know when they happened and all that. So the data will go into a spreadsheet, but in a good way.
Yep, I know how much you love spreadsheets. After all, you are an engineer. All right, coming to that point, I really want to highlight that one. It's so important what you just said. You are ready to be less productive, but you don't want to waste the first 3 hours of your day. And today, I think there's so much motion in the air that we as human beings can be anything we want. And maybe to some extent that might be true, but we also, if we look at the primal geniuses of history, either we look at Einstein, either we look at Steve Jobs, everyone has like a different theory for their very own life. Just as you realized it and you stopped waking up early, I too same tried the all the different things, lying late, waking up late, waking up early. So being ourselves, I really believe this one is so important. As you just put it so nicely, I was just wondering that it was put so nicely, and you two realized the value of trying things. So I want to ask you one thing. I'm extremely curious to know about this. When you started, I don't think there were many people talking about humor at workplaces at that point in time. So scaling a company which focuses on putting humor into workplace, how was really that when you started? How did the company generated revenue? How did you come up with that?
Yeah. Sure. Well, so I will say that, before I started, there have been people who have been, talking about the benefits of humor in the workplace for quite a long period of time. And I feel fortunate because, I've been able to take what they've learned and build off of it and grow. And there's plenty of research out there. And, I'm not an academic, I'm not a researcher. So there's tons
Yep.
of research that has been done by fantastic people to show that, hey, based on these studies, this is an actual valuable skill and people have been doing that for a period of time. There's research that goes back to like 1904 here in the United States, talking a little bit about the benefit of humor. And so it's not, the a brand new idea. I think, what I bring to it, the thing that is slightly different is the engineering approach, is the how do we take this apart and how do we like really make this actionable for people. And that's my whole goal is, I want to elevate the status of humor and kind of shed a light on why it's so important, why it's so valuable in the workplace, that it's not a nice to have, that it is a must have. And I think the other thing is then, okay, how do we teach people to use it? How do we demystify what it is? And there's a great speaker, a guy named Vin Jang, who came up through the world of magic, and he says the impossible becomes possible when you know how it's done. And that's very true in magic, and it's very true in humor. People think that there's almost this, as he'll say, an illusion of difficulty or illusion of focus. And if we can demystify that process, we can simplify it. If we can kind of take things apart and say, okay, this is how it actually works, people can say, oh, wait, I'm capable of doing that. I'm able to. And that's the big focus for us, is really about the how. How do you actually implement these things for better results? And to your point, to your question, it was a very tough thing to start to monetize, because no one really thinks of humor as a bad thing, but no
Yep.
one is like outwardly seeking it in the workplace. There's not like a problem that arises at work and people are like, we need more humor at work, right? No one's Googling it. There's only about a
Exactly.
thousand global monthly searches for the phrase of humor in the workplace. And so it took me some
Wow.
time, but what I realized is that I had to connect humor not as kind of the big idea, but more as a solution to other problems. I had to recognize, oh, okay, so if people are talking about difficulties managing stress, where they're coming home from work and they're completely, demotivated to do any type of work, or they're not showing up very present for their family because they're distracted or focused on something else, or, they are getting burned out and stressed out and they're worn out, or employee engagement is low and they're just kind of not like they're kind of sluggishly going through the day each and every day, and when their alarm clock rings in the morning, they're dreading it, or Sunday they can't even enjoy Sunday because they are dreading Monday and the whole work week coming up in front of them. All these challenges, these signals that say, okay, something isn't working, right? And people I think the challenge has been is people sometimes have this belief that work has to feel like work, that it can't be
Exactly.
fun. And what I'm finding is like, okay, how do we then educate people to say, no, you can actually enjoy it. You can find ways to make it more fun. And so as I started to connect humor to the broader goals, to solving these problems, that certainly helped. And as I got better at my craft, right, the number one business driver for speaking and training is word of mouth and referral. It's people seeing a video online like my TEDx talk, or
Yep.
seeing me present live and being like, oh my god, this was fantastic, can you come and talk to our organization? So as I got better at telling that message, and the craft of speaking and training and all of that, that's where business really started to pick up, because people would see me like, oh, okay, now I understand.
Exactly. When you were just saying we cannot enjoy it, but we can make it more fun work, and a thought just encountered in my mind, that I really think when we love the work we do, we can make it more fulfilling. But the only way we can make it more fun is through or with humor. Like, I never thought about it this way. I was always I always discuss this with my friends, like fun and fulfillment. I will choose fulfillment over fun. But fun is really so important. It's going to make us driven. It's going to energize us. It's going to motivate us. But fun is the aspect we very, very often miss. And I think it's already been twice that you named your TEDx talk, and I just did not want to talk about it early because I loved it. Like, it's one of my favorite talks. I've watched it at least two or three times, I think, and I've watched a plenty of TEDx talks. It has always been my favorite. I love it. I've shared it with my friends, and I I, I just love that TEDx talk. Did you like prepare for all those things, or it now, right now, after practicing humor as a skill, as you say it, does it come to you naturally, or still you keep learning and practicing it, and then it just
Yeah.
goes up?
Yeah, no, it's something that I still learn and practice, and I want to speak to. I mean, you mentioned this idea of fun or fulfillment. I don't think that it has to be an either or. I think that fun
Yep,
can help you
exactly,
lead to fulfillment, and
exactly.
seeking fulfillment can be fun, right? It can be both, and I think
Yep,
one of
yep.
the things that we talk about in our programs is I think to be happy at work, it's not about doing what you love, but rather about loving what you do. And that's very similar. Doing what you love versus loving what you do is similar, but it is an important distinction, because the idea, some people have this idea of like, I just want to do what I love. And no matter what job you have, like, I love what I do. I love the work. I love speaking and everything, but there's aspects of my job that I don't absolutely love. And so people, I think, have this misconception where it's like, oh, there's one job out there that, like, I'll be happy every day going to, and I'll love every aspect of it. And I just don't think that that's realistic, but instead taking the approach of like, okay, I can find ways to love what I do almost regardless of what I'm doing, find ways to make it more fun, then you will be more effective, right? It's a stupid question, but one of the things that we pose to people, and I pose to people listening, is, it's a dumb question, but would you rather do something that is fun or not fun? Right? And the answer is you would want to do something fun. So if you're to make your work a little bit more
Exactly.
fun, uh, then you would probably be more willing to do it. If you're to make your meetings a little bit more fun, people would be more willing to show up. If you're to make your homework a little bit more fun, you'd be more likely to kind of complete it. And this doesn't mean that it's immediately going to, surpass playing video games or watching Netflix or whatever you do kind of in your spare time. But it doesn't mean that it can't make it a little bit more enjoyable. Like, if you have a ton of homework to do, can you put on some of your favorite music as you go through and do the homework? If you have a meeting that you have to propose, can you tell a couple of fun stories or do a couple of interactive exercises, part of it, to make a point? And that's kind of the key focus is, how can you proactively tweak what you do so that it's more enjoyable? And that was true even for the TEDx, right? So I've done two TEDx talks. So the first one was the one that I mentioned kind of at Ohio State,
Yep.
and then did a
Yep.
second one at Texas A&M, and that was a little bit later. And for that one, it was like that was a lot. I put a ton of work into that. And I booked a bunch of stand-up. So once I realized I was doing that talk, I had about a 4-month window to prepare. So I scheduled a bunch of stand-up events so that I could go and work on the humor, because as a humorist, I know certain tricks and techniques of how jokes typically work, but you never, and this is the fun and also frustrating part of humor, is that there's no guarantee. And so the best way to learn if something
Exactly.
works is to actually get it out on stage, to practice it, to try it. And so that's what I did with the TEDx talk, is in multiple environments, worked on the material, found the punchlines, found which way to kind of frame something that would make people laugh. And then also tried it in a speaking environment. Did, 20-minute talks with a couple of organizations just to practice and try it out, so that when I actually delivered the TEDx talk, it wasn't the first time that I had done it. It was one that I was comfortable with, that I had it well memorized, that I knew the flow, that I knew roughly where the laughs were going to be. Um, and that makes for a better, more polished product for people to then be able to see and watch, hopefully, and for it to spread and for people to share it with each other. And that, I think, is what we're seeing, hopefully.
Yep, I just so much love the idea, and now I get it why the TEDx talk was so good. So I have a personal question. Like I have so much of this query. As you said, we have to we have to start accepting the seeing look at the idea as we have to love what we do rather do what we love. So, uh, as a student, I just want to ask you one question. How do I fall in love with my academics? Like I so much hate it. Like trust me, I've tried doing a startup without my parents or anyone knowing it. In the end I did not do it due to like I found that I that wasn't something which was deeply rooted in me. I've tried a plenty of things. I've tried photography, but still these books, like, oh god. Yesterday I'm in 10th standard, so I was learning the definition of light, and as I started reading the definition of light, I went to the theory of relativity proposed by Einstein. I started wondering a parallel universe and all those kind of things. And when I stepped back into reality, the time had already passed. So time is relative, isn't it?
Hmm.
So how do I manage that? Like how do I make it more like I can make it more fun, but still it's so irritating. Do you have a solution to that? You're an engineer, you
Well,
have
I
to
mean,
find a solution.
yeah, I'm an engineer. Well, and that's part of the experimentation part is what I think is so valuable. I think it's fantastic. Yeah, try an entrepreneurial venture and see if it works, or if you like the process, or maybe you find that you don't. Or try photography and see if you like the process of framing pictures, and all the subtlety that goes into it, and all of that. These are all things that you know are helpful. There's no guarantee that you're going to, love every aspect of what you do. So you just try a bunch of things. And I think you can try also things that will make things more fun. Try stuff like, okay, if I listen to a certain type of music when I do my homework, does that make it more enjoyable? Or if I do certain types of projects and problems with friends, does that make it actually more fun? Right? Try a bunch of different stuff to make it a little bit more fun. And then I think the other thing is when you understand, or when you connect what you do, or what you are doing, to your larger goal, that makes the process a little bit easier. So rather than just ignoring um, kind of the bigger picture, think about it as like, okay, what do my studies help me to provide later? Oh, this helps me to achieve my goal, or this idea of what I maybe want to achieve in a couple years, or this degree that I'm going after will help me to get the type of job that I'm looking for, or is teaching me how to learn, or is teaching me discipline, or is teaching me what I do and don't like. And having that perspective where you're thinking about the bigger picture and connecting what you are doing to that bigger picture, to that bigger goal, I think can make it a little bit more sustainable and makes it more willing that you're willing to jump into it.
All right, 15 more minutes. Gotta make it worth it. So you gave the answer
Mhm.
of that
I
question,
did, yeah. So the
or
high level. So if you want, I think you'll still have the upload. So for the podcast itself, have the full answer. But the general thought was, or in kind of re-articulating it here is, I mean, how do you know? I mean, I think the experimentation that you're talking about is valuable, right? Trying different things out
yep,
is part of what you learn, what you like and you don't like. I did the same thing, So I didn't talk about before, and I didn't share this before, but like the when I before I left PNG, for about a year, I knew that I was probably going to leave. I just wasn't sure for what. I didn't know if it was going to be humor that works, or maybe I was doing a lot of improv and stand up in New York City. And so I was like, maybe I want
yep,
to be an actor. Maybe I want to be a writer. Maybe I want to be a director or something. That's the more traditional, quote unquote, traditional things in the comedy space. Maybe I want to be a stand up comedian. And so I tried a bunch of these things. I would, do informational interviews with people to kind of say, okay, what's it like? What do you like most about being a comic on the road? Or what do you like least about it? Or, what do you like about writing or directing? Or what's the hardest part about it? Or what excites you about getting up in the morning about, this job that you have? And
yep,
I tried them in small fits and starts as well. So like on the weekends, I would go and do things. So sometimes I'd go and travel and be a comic on the road for the weekend, emceeing or hosting in another city. Or I would try writing sketches and then having other people act in them and see if I like that process. A friend and I
yep,
wrote, direct, and edited a short film. So we tried a bunch of stuff, and what I realized was, of all the things that I was trying, this speaking and training thing was the thing that I loved the most. It was the one thing that I kept going back to that I really enjoyed. And so that experimentation process, I think, is incredibly helpful. And while you're experimenting, still trying to find ways to have fun and recognize the larger picture. So, I think even things like schoolwork, if you can
exactly.
connect the larger like degree that you're going after and what is going to provide you want it some additional credibility in the spaces that you want to go to, potentially the credentials that you need for a certain type of job, those types of things. It makes
Yep,
the schoolwork a little bit more like, okay, I'm not just doing this homework for the sake of doing this homework. I'm doing this as a larger
exactly,
project of learning how to learn, of how to be disciplined, of finding ways to enjoy what I do even if I'm assigned this work to do, and take that as a learning step and just experiment with what makes it more fun. Does listening to music make homework more fun? Does doing it with friends make it more fun? Does rewarding yourself with a dessert, or with playing a video game or exercise or whatever before or after, make it more fun? Just experiment with different things, and it's that's part of the fun itself, is discovering what makes it fun.
exactly. So after experimenting all those things, did you make a spreadsheet?
I have a spread. I don't think I have a set spreadsheet of that, but I mean I do. I also, so if data isn't in a spreadsheet for me, it is in an Evernote file. I take a bunch of notes. I do some journaling
Okay.
and all that kind of stuff. So I did. I don't think I have a set spreadsheet, but I did kind of track like, okay, what are the things that I like, I don't like, and all that. If I were to do it now, this was at this point 10 years ago. If I were to do that process now, I probably would create a spreadsheet with weighted averages and all that. That's what I did when, moving apartments and selecting what city to live in and everything. So I'm a big fan of data helping me make a decision. But
Yep,
no, I think it's just I think the process, and the reason why I like data in that process is to reflect. I think so often we get caught up in the day to day work of everything that we don't sit back and think about, okay, on that project that I just did, or on that homework assignment, or that work thing that I just had to complete, what went well? What could I have done better? How could I have had it more, fun or more humor to that process? If I were to do it again, what could I do differently? And I, make this point in the TEDx talk, but I think that reflection on the past leads to action in the future. And so taking that time and thinking about and experience, and thinking about how you would improve it is a long term strategy for growth of you as a human.
True, so true. I 100% agree with you. So, can you share three of your experiences, like embarrassing experiences as a humor artist? I know you would have plenty, or at least many. At least many. You have to have many. Come on.
Well,
So
of course. I mean,
three.
trying. I mean, yeah. So humor in any regard is always a little bit of a risk. You can never be sure of, how it's going to work out or how you're going to do it. For example, the fourth stand-up show that I ever did was a disaster. Because the fourth stand-up
Fourth
show that I
one.
did, yeah, the number four, was it was a stand-up comedy competition at Ohio State, and I had made it into the second round. And for that particular competition, they had three guest judges. And the three guest judges were a guy named Mark Curry. He was on a TV show here in the United States called Hanging with Mr. Cooper. So I had like seen this guy on TV before. I was like, oh my God, he's famous. The second comedian was Joe Coy, who has recently had some great stand up specials on Netflix and other places, but was a pretty well known comedian, or a pretty established comedian at least. And then the third one was Daniel Tosh. This was before Tosh had Tosh.0 here in the States, but he was a known name. Like, I was like, okay, I know this guy is funny. I've seen him before. He's hilarious. And so they were three guest judges. They sat on the stage behind a table. You would do a 6-minute set, and then they would judge you on it. They would say what was good and bad about it. And it was in front
Right.
of 200 people, the largest audience I'd ever done stand up before at that point. My mom and brother were in the audience. It was the first time they were seeing me do stand up. And I get 3.5 minutes into the set, and I completely forgot what I was going to say. Like, I just completely blanked. And so I stood on stage, looking down at the stage, looking down at my feet, just going like, wow, um, sorry, wow. And I did that for like 30 seconds. And then eventually I remembered one last joke. I shared it, and it was awful. It was like the longest 30 seconds of my life. And, I'm one of the things that's nice about being an improviser, learning the yes and mentality, being a speaker and all that is recognizing that, I don't think necessarily that everything happens for the best. But I do think that we can learn from almost every situation, that we can grow from almost every situation. And so with this perspective, like with me bombing on stage, with it not going well at all, I learned quite a bit. And it took me a while. It wasn't immediate, but I heard this quote from Dave Chappelle, who said that when he bombed as a comedian, that's when he knew he could actually make it in that as a career, because he's like, no one died from him, messing up some jokes. He wasn't physically injured. It wasn't great. He didn't enjoy the experience, but that was the worst that could happen in this profession. So he could be okay. And if he's already hit that rock bottom, then it's only up from there. And that perspective helped me to say, oh, okay, well, I can learn from this. What I learn from this? Oh, well, don't memorize my set word for word. I'd memorize it every down to like the letter. And when I forgot one word, it messed me up for the entire set. So I can learn, okay, be more extemporaneous about that. And there are, countless examples of me bombing and trying jokes that didn't work, or saying things that, maybe weren't quite exactly the right thing to say. And then over time, learning to be able to build past that. Because I do think that with humor, intent plays a large part, and people recognizing that if you're using humor, whether that's out of malice, out of it's you being aggressive towards someone, or you trying to be more playful. And that's certainly been true within my experience of recognizing, like, oh, I didn't say that out of offense. Let me learn. If I did offend you, let me learn about why and understand and be more empathetic towards you. And okay, we can use this as a growing experience, as opposed to you just assuming that I was being a jerk for some reason.
So true. Everything. Oof. I just wish your home or your office was near mine. I'd go every single day. I'd do anything. I just wanted to spend some time with you. Um, oof, there are so many things to
Yeah.
ask, so many things to know, but 5 minutes time. Time is relative, you know. It
Hmm.
went so fast, and then the internet. Oof, everything cheats. So the last few
Yeah, but
questions.
it's I mean
Okay.
it's perspective and it's learning, and that's part of how do we with any environment, how can we have a little bit more fun or playfulness to what we do.
Yep. One of my friends, my best friend, would love to listen to this episode, and after listening, I'm pretty sure he's the first thing he's gonna tell me is, "Thank God this wasn't a boring mindset and the same shit thing." So, all right, the final questions. What's your vision and mission for humor that works?
Yeah, so my mission is to, and I kind of alluded to it earlier. It's two parts. It's to elevate the status of humor and as a valuable skill set for everyone to learn, and then to teach people how to use it. And that's the goal. And the vision of it is for people to recognize that it is a valuable skill, and it's to empower people to use it. Because for me, I was an introvert growing up. I was always more on the quiet, more reserved side. I mean, even now at networking events, I don't always feel super comfortable, and I've had challenges, like many people, with
Yep.
imposter syndrome in the past, and nervousness in situations, and all of these different things. And humor gave me such a stronger ability to feel comfortable. I was at a workshop not too long ago, and people were asking, like, how do you get more confident in speaking and presenting and all of that? And part of it is through repetition. And you can either say, okay, well, I'm going to practice and learn every single possible thing that might ever happen, and then I'll be more confident because I know everything is planned for, which it's probably unrealistic. Or you can get comfortable with being, with the unknown, get comfortable in improvisation, get comfortable with the idea that, okay, I may not be able to plan for everything that's going to happen, but I feel confident in my ability to build off of it, to improvise in that moment. And so to give people that kind of gift of feeling more confident, of the ability to make people laugh, which then puts them at ease and puts you at ease, which helps you to settle into a talk or into a conversation or into a relationship or whatever. To give people that gift is something that I feel fortunate that I received, that I was pushed into. Like, I wasn't someone who like raised my hand and says, I'm going to do improv. It was more my best friend kind of pushing me into it. So that's part of the mission of what we want to do with Humor That Works, is introduce humor, particularly to the people who would maybe say, but I'm not funny, or I can never do stand up, or I can never do improv, and say, oh no, you can. It's partially a choice, and here's how we again demystify it, make it easier, so that now you have this as just an additional tool in your tool belt that will help you in a number of different situations or circumstances. And that's what we're trying to do.
Seriously, it's such a light, super valuable, and such an efficient tool. Like, if we use it properly, humor, it's so efficient, it's so light, it's so fun. This conversation. Okay, what is the one thing you hate the most about this world?
The one thing that I hate the most, I mean, on the real side, I like the real answer is, I hate that people get so caught up in their own selfishness sometimes, and there's some of their own goals that they don't think about the larger picture of how can they help serve more people. I think that if we measured success not by the number of dollars that you made, but the number of lives you've positively impacted, I think that's a greater way to show wealth and experience and success. So I wish we focus more on those types of things. And then as a joke answer, I would say I strongly dislike beets. Beets, I think, are the worst food that I've ever eaten. It tastes like dirt, and I don't understand how some people consume them willingly. But yeah, that's what I'd say.
I have so many more questions, but sacrifice in life. Oh, all right. This one is an extra, but I have to ask it. How much would you rate on a scale out of 10? How much would you rate yourself of your humor, like out of a scale of 10?
A scale of 10? Are we talking about my sense of humor, my ability to humor, or my agency with humor?
Your sense of humor.
My sense of humor, I think, is probably an 8. I think there are certain things that I'm just like, that's not all that funny to me that I know other people enjoy. And so I'm not going to say that it's perfect and big. My ability to humor, so this would be the ability to create humor to make people laugh, I think is probably a 7. It's one that I work really, really hard on, but it's not always completely natural. I think there are, I'm not even gonna say, I'm nowhere close to like say an Eddie Izzard or Dave Chappelle or an Ali Wong in terms of like level of skill. I think they're fantastic. It's one that I'm trying to prove all the time, but improve all the time. But it's still opportunity to grow. And then agency with humor, I do think I do tend to do particularly well with using humor to achieve a specific result. So not just making people laugh, but using it as a way to build rapport with someone or to get them to pay attention to a message or that kind of thing. And so for that, I'd say probably a 9. So I'll give you a 879 is my score for that breakdown.
Okay, and out of scale of 10, this episode, fun,
Oh,
like
this
fun, how fun it was
No, I mean it's been
doing.
fantastic for me. I would say I'll give it a 9 just because the internet came in, and I feel bad that we lost a little bit of time, and that's neither one of our faults or anything like that. That's just the reality of it. But no, I
Yes.
had a great time chatting. I hope other people like take some value in what we've said. I know it wasn't necessarily the funniest. That you're like, you're getting a humor engineer. We're gonna have a bunch of jokes. Well, no, let's talk a little bit about the larger aspect of life and things. So hopefully people enjoyed it.
Actually, we did not even get the time to talk about the larger aspects. I wanted to talk. I knew you were an engineer, so also wanted to talk about AI and machine learning. And I had so many plans. Oh shit. Okay, the final two. I'm not gonna waste any more of
Mhm.
your time. I'm pretty sure after this one, after this interview, Tess is gonna be so relaxed. No more postponements.
Good.
What advice would you give to someone like me? I mean, of my age, who is trying different things. In the last few days, I've been interested in astrophysics and I've been researching into that. So I'm truly crazy. So, what advice would you give to
Well,
someone like me?
I would say give yourself permission to experiment, to try stuff. I think the idea that when we graduate from school that we should know what we want to do for the rest of our lives is unrealistic and not even ideal. The world is constantly changing. You as a person are constantly changing, and so,
Exactly.
what you do right when you graduate doesn't mean that's what you have to do forever. You can talk to plenty of people in their 30s or 40s or 50s or 60s or 70s, whatever, and ask them, okay, what was your degree in, and did that match what you did for your life? And most people will say no, or they'll have multiple careers, they'll try multiple things, and so I think one, give yourself that permission to recognize that if you don't have that one big passion right away, that's okay, and not to rest on it. That doesn't mean like, oh, we'll just see what happens to you, but no, give yourself that excuse, that permission to then experiment, to try a bunch of stuff and see what resonates, and give sufficient time to it. Don't be like, oh, well, I thought about this for 2 seconds and now I'm moving on to something else. You don't want to constantly move from thing to thing to thing indefinitely, but giving yourself that freedom to try some stuff for a little bit and find out what you like and don't like, and to build off of each step of the way is what I would say. And have fun doing it, of course.
I wanted some extra time to even share everything about my life and then ask you what else do I need to do. Like I always irritate the people who are senior in my age or doing something that I want to do. Like always irritate them, my father, my teachers, everyone. Just go to them, and when I don't give context, they're like you are uh, going in the wrong direction, because without context everything sounds like that. All right, you don't have time. What's your take on chasing happiness? I did not, out of excitement, I even forgot to tell you what this chasing happiness and excuse the word chase. It's by chasing happiness I mean putting happiness in the first place,
Mm-hmm.
like putting happiness in the first place as a priority to anything in the world, like not chasing money. People chase money, formal education, focus on those kind of things rather than their happiness. So what's your take on that one?
I mean, I think that so my take on happiness is that, and we share this in our programs as well, is that you are responsible for your own happiness. Is my take. I
True.
don't think that it means you control your happiness. I don't think that there's a lot of things that go into
True.
play with emotions, whether it is uh, chemical levels in the brain, all the way up to things that happen to you and things that to that respect. But I think you are responsible for it in the sense of you have to take ownership of trying to put yourself in situations where you can be successful, where you can be happy, and that it's not up to other people. It's not up to your parents, it's not up to your teachers, it's not up to your coworkers or your boss or whatever to check in and make sure that you're happy. Now, hopefully they do. Hopefully they don't detract from your happiness to make it worse, but it's ultimately not up to them. It's up to you, and you decide every day how you approach your day, about how you choose to do some of the work that you do. And so where you do have ownership, where you do have autonomy, where you do have control, find ways to make it more fun, find ways to make it more enjoyable for yourself, find ways to own it for yourself and control the things that you can, and learn to kind of let go or manage or mitigate the things you can't.
So true, so true, every bit of it. All right, the time, I'm sorry for taking the 6 minutes extra. I've been just looking at the clock like anything, and now time was, I hate time now. All right,
Yeah,
thank you so
went
much,
super
Andrew, for
quick, but
doing this.
absolutely no. Thank you so much for having me, and with the multiple reschedule and all that. It was great to chat with you, and hopefully of value to the people listening.
Yup, right from postponing from October. So this is the next year, March, and finally we did it. And I hope we do again the episode again. Um, I wish I could buy a home near yours. So,
Absolutely, yeah. We'll
yeah,
find a time
God
to chat in the future. I've got to run, but thank you so much for having me.